Modern courts split assets. Ancient codes split bodies from breath. This is the blood price of adultery. Shocking, right? Imagine living in a world where a broken promise could cost you your life. Sometimes by water, sometimes by stones, sometimes by fire. That's not a horror movie plot. For much of history, that was the legal blood price for adultery. Today, we're unpacking how different societies punished it, why the harshest penalties often fell on women, and what these punishments tell us about power, property, and control. Buckle up. This is going to be intense. Let's start by stepping onto a riverbank in ancient Mesopotamia. If a married woman in Babylon was surprised with another man, Law 129 of Hammurabi's code ordered both lovers to be tied and thrown into the water, unless the husband pardoned his wife, in which case the king could pardon her partner too. That's not just trial by water, it's death by water, with a specific loophole that gives the husband enormous power over whether the woman lives or dies. Now, if there wasn't clear proof, say a rumor or suspicion, the law could force a river ordeal. The accused woman might be made to plunge into the river to let the river god judge her. If she survived, she was considered innocent. If she drowned, the gods had spoken. Earlier and neighboring laws used the same ordeal when adultery was suspected, so this wasn't an isolated quirk. It was a system everyone digested and accepted at that time. Ancient law codes read like they protect honor, but the subtext is property. Wives, children, and legitimate heirs were the foundation of inheritance. When the code lets a husband spare his wife, and through his mercy, the king spare the lover, it's not exactly equality. It's a reminder that her life was bound to his decision. Move a few centuries and a couple hundred miles west, and we're in the world of biblical Israel, where the rule is blunt. Leviticus 20:10 says that if a man commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, both adulterer and adulteress shall be put to death. Deuteronomy 22 gets even more specific, laying out different scenarios. Adultery, accusations against a bride, a woman caught in the city or in the field, and in several of those the prescribed penalty is stoning. That image of a crowd throwing stones is brutal, and it's meant to be. It's a public statement about communal boundaries and control over women's bodies and reputations. Even in the New Testament, the famous woman caught in adultery scene assumes stoning is the expected punishment. Jesus diffuses it with, "Let the one without sin cast the first stone," but the default is still deadly. And then there's fire. In the Hebrew Bible, burning is specifically attached to certain sexual offenses. For example, if a priest's daughter profanes herself, she shall be burned with fire. That's Leviticus 21:9. And in the story of Tamar, when Judah is told his daughter-in-law is pregnant, he orders, "Bring her out and let her be burned," before he realizes he himself is the father. These are exceptional cases, but they show the symbolic weight of fire as the ultimate shaming punishment. Now, not every ancient society reached for stones or fire. Classical Athens, the birthplace of democracy, took another route. The crime wasn't quite adultery, as we use the term. It was morchaia, illicit sex with a free citizen woman. The law allowed a husband to kill an adulterer he caught in the act, and one of the era's most famous courtroom speeches, Lysias, on the murder of Eratosthenes, defends a husband who did exactly that. The woman, by contrast, could lose civic status or face divorce and disgrace. The upshot: the man's body took the risk of death. The woman bore a lifelong civil and social penalty. Rome, too, made adultery a public offense, but with a different flavor. Under Augustus's Lex Julia de Adulterius, the penalties usually weren't stoning or drowning. They were exile, confiscation of property, and legal obligations to prosecute. Fathers had enhanced powers if they caught a daughter and her lover in flagrante, while husbands had to follow procedures and could face charges if they looked the other way. Again, control and reputation were everything, and the double standard, harshness for wives, more leeway for husbands, was baked into the system. In Islamic legal traditions, it's complicated and often misunderstood. The Quran itself sets the punishment for unlawful sex at 100 lashes, and it requires a very high bar of proof, witnesses, and strict standards to protect the accused. The Quranic text does not mention stoning. Stoning, rajam, appears in hadith literature and in many classical juristic schools as the penalty for a married offender. But even then, the evidentiary threshold, 4 eyewitnesses to the act or a repeated, uncoerced confession, made legal stonings very rare in practice. In modern times, a few states have reintroduced stoning on the books, but it's controversial among scholars and activists, precisely because it's not in the Quranic text, and because of the evidentiary safeguards built into the tradition. The takeaway: you can't talk about stoning in Islam without talking about sources, standards of proof, and enormous historical variation. Back in Europe, medieval and early modern laws swung wildly from leniency to spectacle. Some German law books and city statutes prescribed death for adulterers in aggravated cases. That's more the exception than the rule, but it reminds us how intensely some communities policed sexual boundaries. And if you're wondering, did this ever happen in early America? Yes, Puritan Massachusetts wrote biblical penalties right into law. The Massachusetts Body of Liberties, 1641, lists adultery among the capital crimes. The adulterer and adulteress shall surely be put to death. And in 1644, Mary Latham, 18 years old, and James Britton were executed in Boston for adultery, the best documented case of its kind in colonial America, recorded in Governor John Winthrop's papers. Even in a culture that prided itself on moral reform, the death penalty for adultery was rare and controversial, but it was real. When we zoom out, a pattern pops into focus. Across centuries and cultures, states and communities treated women's sexuality as a public matter tied to lineage, property, and male honor. Even where the letter of the law said both shall die, enforcement and social consequences were often gendered. In Mesopotamia, a husband's decision could literally decide whether his wife lived. In biblical laws, the imagined crowd is stoning a woman. In Athenian practice, the male seducer might be killed on the spot, while the woman's civic life is permanently downgraded. In Roman law, the wife's fault could exile her and strip her of property, while husbands enjoyed more room to wander, as long as they avoided other men's wives. In many Islamic courts, the requirement of 4 eyewitnesses made conviction exceptionally hard. But community honor codes could still endanger women outside the court system. It's also crucial to notice how proof worked. In cultures that used ordeals, like throwing someone into a river, nature itself judged the accused. How pathetic is that? In legal systems that demanded multiple eyewitnesses, convictions were vanishingly rare, yet accusations alone could stain a woman's life. And pregnancy, in many places, functioned as evidence against women in ways that had no equivalent for men. When the law uses water, stones, or fire, it's not just punishing an individual, it's broadcasting a hierarchy of whose bodies matter and whose voices count. So why tell this story now? Because women's history isn't just a parade of suffering. It's a record of resistance, negotiation, and change. For every code that tried to drown, stone, or burn women into silence, there were women and men who called out hypocrisy, told their stories, petitioned judges, and reshaped norms. And here's the pivot I always want to make with you. Understanding the blood price of adultery helps us see how legal systems can disguise control as morality. When a society says the harshest penalties are about honor or purity, ask whose honor, whose purity, who's deciding, and who's paying. These questions from the past are still razor sharp in the present. If this episode gave you goosebumps, stick around. I make these deep dives to give you receipts and context you can use in conversations today. If you want more stories like this, where we read the fine print, center women, and make history feel like a conversation between us, tap subscribe, drop a like so the algorithm knows to show this to more people, and tell me in the comments. Which part shocked you most? The river, the stones, or the fire? And what topic should we unpack next? I'm listening. See you soon.